We are live.
And rolling?
Roll it.
All right.
Episode 17. We're here at Colca Studios. Need a firehouse built? Give them a call. Download the Firewire app, available on iOS and Android, and go to the volleyhousepodcast.com to ask us questions or send in stories or videos you'd like us to review. Also, give us a follow on all social media platforms at Volly House Podcast. Let's start with
Disclaimer.
Oh yeah. Oh, actually, you know what? I
No,
took
Phil
that
don't
out.
like it.
Yeah.
Phil don't like it.
Let's do iCommand board.
iCommand board.
Every video we see from a career department incident shows an incident command board on scene. Yet, in many NIOSH LODD reports, a recurring finding is a lack of proper incident command. As a chief of the volunteer fire service, your responsibility is to ensure the safety of everyone operating at every incident. Gone are the days of managing this in your head or on a simple whiteboard. The owner of iCommand Board, a volunteer fire chief, took this challenge head on by developing a professional tool tailored for volunteer fire officers. These command boards are designed with size, affordability, and most importantly, accountability at the forefront. Packed with critical information and checklists, they're built to help you stay organized and focused at every event. Visit iCommandBoard.com today and take the next step in ensuring the safety and success of your department. And also mention the Volly House Podcast for 10% off. And also, red alert. If you've listened to this podcast long enough or been in the fire service long enough, you probably know that 10 different fire departments will do the same thing in 10 different ways. Every episode is different, whether it's scheduling permits, reporting, points tracking, inventory, or truck checks. Chances are high that your department does it differently from the one down the street. Hopefully, you're managing most of this with software. Is your software vendor putting you into their box? When you ask for a small change to your system, do they just add it to the list or do they get it done? Maybe you bought another piece of software just to get scheduling right. Next thing you know, you have 5 different vendors to manage your firehouse just because your original vendor couldn't make a small change. Alpine Software's Red NMX is the all-in-one fire software that fits the needs of your department. Their average customer has been with them for 19 years. Why? They've dedicated people to set up your system, convert your data, and get you trained. They have a US-based call and email support staff. If you're tired of we'll add it to the list, join the hundreds of other departments that have switched to Alpine software.
Awesome. It's a mouthful.
It is. It's a lot to read in front. That's why I like spreading them out. Just to kind of break up the monotony a little bit.
Monotony.
So how about last episode with Bobby?
Excellent. We probably could have went on another 2 hours.
100%.
Talked about a lot of stuff, and I think we hit on some great items, and we'll go further into some of that today, I think, and just discuss it. Why not,
Yeah, I think you and I were discussing that we do touch on a lot of topics, but sometimes we might not go too deep into them.
Yeah, we've been just kind of going by the wayside and just
Right.
filtering through, not really going too deep into some of the items. So, hopefully we can touch upon some of this stuff today. And then, we talked about doing some training videos, stuff like that down the line,
Yeah. What was I going to say?
Well, I don't want to miss on, yesterday there was a funeral for an FDNY captain that passed away, Greg Schmidt, former volunteer in East Northport. I think he did 18 years there. We're going to get deep into mental health and stuff like that down the line in PTSD. But it's something that we should, eventually talk about. It is a hot topic button. It's always been there, and I think we need to touch on it some more. But the volunteers came out in force yesterday. I want to thank all the departments from Long Island that came out and supported. We had 5 ladder arches down Nichols Road when the family passed through for the processional, and also a flag arch up by the church. So it was a really nice, farewell to a person that's put a lot of time in and always had a smile on his face. So.
Right now, that's good that and we also appreciate everyone who, when we put it up on our story, we had some people reaching out to us to ask for information that they can supply a ladder truck for the arch. So thank you to those departments that reached out to us. That's what it's all about, the brotherhood. We did get a submission Somebody,
Put my glasses on.
it's not a suspended or not.
Oh,
If you
that's
want,
darn.
you could put them on.
Put them on anyway.
Yeah,
We
why
can hit it
not?
later.
Yeah, why not?
It's very, very bright in here.
It is. You can use go to frontlineoptics.com. It's starting to get sunny out.
Sunny.
Use code VHP15 for 15% off on any of these shades that you see on the website. This submission, we got somebody asking us to give us our backgrounds on the fire service.
I had a few people ask me about that too. They said, "You never introduce yourselves." I said, "Well, I think people know who we are by now, but I guess maybe not." So
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start because you got a whole freaking
I'll
sheet.
keep it short.
So I've been in the fire service for a little over 15 years now, served in 2 different departments, went through the ranks up to captain. I was also part of the tech rescue team, also been on different training committees as well. Just to give you a quick background on me, Phil, I think is 10 years or maybe a little over 10 years. Yeah, he's currently a captain.
Truck company.
And then, Cap, go ahead. Would you blow us away?
Blow us away. Oh my God. It seemed like I've been around this forever, but yeah, my dad joined in 1973. I was 3 years old at the time, and all I ever remember was growing up around the volunteer firehouse. All our friends, my dad's friends, they were all volunteers. I couldn't wait to get involved. I was like buffing fires on my bicycle way back in the day, and listening to a scanner, what we had. When I was 14 years old, joined the juniors. I was a junior firefighter for 4.5 years because we can't join the department until you're 18 years old and out of school. So I had to wait till I graduated in June to join the department. So I was a secretary, lieutenant, captain in the juniors. Then I went into the fire department in 1988. So I'm in my 37th year. And, I've never looked back. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I went through all the ranks, lieutenant, captain, chief, twice, commissioner for 8 years, and training committee, teaching, and then on top of that, New York City Fire Department, I was blessed. I've been blessed my whole life, really. Wound up retiring as a lieutenant in New York City. I spent 20 years in special operations, tech rescue, hazmat, and I teach all over the place for all different agencies. So I've been around a little bit.
I should mention, so fun fact about me, and I never...
Fun fact?
Yeah, I never mentioned, I started off in the juniors.
You did too.
But it was they just started their junior program.
Mm-hmm.
And I joined, and I think I was in for maybe 2 months until I turned 17, and I was allowed to join the department at 17. Right. And the fun fact is I was the first junior to become a firefighter. And if I'm not mistaken, I think currently right now, one of their chiefs started out as junior. Mm-hmm. Around the same time as me. So junior programs, they definitely,
I think they're great. I really do.
I think it's a good recruiting point.
It is.
And then, we kind of touched on it a little bit the last episode with maybe retention's a little bit more important than recruiting at this point until we can really get our hands on.
Like I said, I think they're both important.
No, for sure.
But, not knowing, or that unknown of people that we don't have already, and then we have to bring them through the paces and train them. And I'm not against any of that. I think it's very important to bring new people in. But we should focus a lot on retaining the people we have. And some people, it's like waves. The fire service is waves anyway. For a while it was, there was certain things that happened, and it's like there was a hazmat wave. Like hazmat was a big important thing, and then laws came out that we had to have hazmat ops, like we were talking about, and all that stuff in order to be a firefighter. And then the hazmat kind of peaked, and then it kind of started drifting down. And then the next wave came, it was like tech rescue. Tech rescue is big.
Yeah, I remember.
And then it started coming down again, and then it starts coming back up again, and like these waves come back and forth, and we ride these waves. And it's the same thing with your life. Like I was explaining to you when I went through all these stages, I was the kid that lived at home, just wanted to hang out at the Volly House every day. That's all I wanted to do was go to calls and fires. And and you ride that wave for a little while, and it's like, then you want to be an officer. So you start working on that and teaching and stuff. And then all of a sudden, like, you get a girlfriend, and it's like your time starts dwindling a little because you got to spend time with the girlfriend. Then they become your fiance. Then, and then you have kids, you get married, you have a house, and then, maybe your time goes a little less, or you come back up and you ride these waves back and forth in the fire service. So, we could have some good people that have been around 5 years, 10 years, that are just going through a stage in their life. And maybe they can't be as active at that point, but how do we keep them before we don't want to lose them?
Right.
And especially if they're established in our communities, because they bought a house, they have a family and everything. We don't want to lose those people. So we need to work on how we can keep those people and get that wave to come back up and make them more active again. So it takes a lot. And, I've seen it. I mean, I had a Chiefs car with baby seats in the back seat, and, I would occasionally go to a call with them, but I tried not to.
Right. Yeah.
But, take them down the firehouse, do my paperwork in the chief's office, and, you move through these stages in your life, and we're all going to have them. You're all going to have trouble at some point. So try to retain those people, figure out how we can keep those people, and keep them for forever.
Right.
We don't want to lose them. Like Greg Schmidt, this captain that just passed away, he was in East Northport like 18 years, and he moved into our community. I was trying to get him to join years ago. And he had just had a lot going on in his life, and I said this before, I have another neighbor that just moved in from Nassau County, trying to get him to join, but he's right now still with his department because he works in Nassau County. So, how do we get these people? How do we keep them? They're now established in our communities. How do we reel them in, without too much of a burden or too much training or anything else, but reel those people in and retain them.
Right. Absolutely. So you had wanted to get a little bit deeper into some of the training stuff. So what do you have on deck for us today?
Well, I think a lot of stuff, and we touched on some of this in the past, and Bobby talked on some of this stuff the other day, and I thought it was just a good lead into talking more about maybe the meters and quick response and stuff like that, but some of the hazmat areas also firefighting areas as
That
well.
one clip we put up, Bobby talking about the coffee roasters.
Oh, the coffee.
I think that's like, it's already past 10,000 views.
Really?
People are like, wow, like we didn't know this. So it's,
I didn't know that. 37 years in the fire service. I teach hazmat. Like I said, I know about a lot of cross sensitivities, and I know how to go through the paces of trying to figure out what the possible source is, whether it is CO or not. And probably I would have done the same thing he did down the line. I would have done and went through all my normal avenues to try to figure out what that source is, and eventually probably would have went to Google or one of those apps, and start looking at information. And like you said, the Googler, you throw it in the Googler and see what happens. So that was one I didn't know about coffee beans.
right.
So, I say this all the time, you're going to be humbled at some point. You don't know everything. I don't know everything. And I could just see the other day, I learned something the other day again. And you have to be a firefighter every single day. You have to go out there, you have to read articles, you have to do different things, and keep yourself abreast of the most modern techniques that are out there, because we're in an ever-changing world, and we have to stay cognizant of that. So I think we should, maybe at least talk about 3 items today, and, I'm not keeping track of time, which we should have been. We don't have the piss clock going.
Yeah, no piss clock.
But just maybe we'll touch on meters. We talk about, the propagation of the batteries and how fast things are flashing over now, and the importance of quick response. And maybe just talk a little bit about decon, like what Bobby was talking about with decon, not just in the hazmat world, but from the fire side of what we're dealing with on a regular basis. And when we're talking about, hazmat stuff like this isn't just for a hazmat team. This isn't for a specialist or anything else. This is strictly firefighter basic knowledge stuff that you're going to deal with when you're out there in the field and responding. So I just figured that would be a good avenue.
Yeah, sure. Let's hop into it.
All right. So, first off, we talked about the meter and proper metering and monitoring. And, I just brought a Altair 4 gas here with me. just to go over a few items with it. And like Bobby was saying about writing things down, we're not going to know everything. We're not going to keep everything in our head. We try to remember numbers. We try to remember as much knowledge as we can. And like you said, there's a lot of information, but eventually you get into overload, and that's why you got to constantly update yourself. And one of the things I talk about is this file cabinet in our head. We fill it with a bunch of files. We have to update these files, and then when we come across an incident, we're basically pulling that file out and saying, I know what this is, or this is what I think it could be. But just talking about cheat sheets and writing things down, and these are just some cheat cards that I made up that I attached to the meters, and it's probably hard to see here. Um, but it just covers the gases and the toxicities that some of the things we're going to cover, or the gases in our meter. So a 4-gas meter is covering four gases basically. Usually it's oxygen, your LEL, hydrogen sulfide, H2S, and carbon monoxide. Those are the big ones that we're going to see. What you have to realize is even the NIOSH Pocket Guide, that book that we have, only covers like 677 chemicals. There are actually millions of chemicals out
Right.
there, and they're making more every day.
Yeah.
So,
I do think that's important that you like that little tag that you have with all the, numbers on it, toxicity. I've seen it on the pump panels on trucks. Just things are a little bit crazy. You're up there as a pump operator. Maybe you haven't done it in a while. You're used to driving, but you're not always on the pump panel all the time.
Correct.
So, when it comes to a specific operation, are they using a 2.5-inch hose, with the solid bore nozzle on it versus an 1.75 with a fog nozzle on it? You could just reference those little sheets that are right there. Yeah.
And I was showing Phil, I showed him around our rigs yesterday when he came to the firehouse.
Yeah, you put up Buff God.
Yeah, oh my God, the stickers. Yeah, I got more to add to my locker, but right inside the pump operator's panel is a chart I made up, and it just tells you. You just look at it and says 4 lengths of hose.
Yep.
And
Pressure.
It tells you, 130 psi. You need to feed it.
Right. Right.
So the chart is there. So if they're stretching like a working line, and our working lines are 2.25-inch hose with 1.75 on top of it with a solid bore nozzle, you pull off 6-7 lengths. So the first 4 is 1.75. After that's 2.25.
Right.
But you just go to the chart and you look at it and you say, that's the pressure I got to pump.
Right. Yeah, because it gets tough when you're trying to calculate friction loss and the differences between and how many lengths. Like you're trying to sit up there doing math problems in your head while you're trying to get the guy's water quick.
Right.
And I would like to bet most of us aren't math guys, right off the top of our heads.
Listen, math can be difficult, but we try to keep it to street hydraulics and basics to get those numbers. I mean, if you really go into a pump operator's class, they go into the coefficients and all this calculations to get the correct pressure, but it also depends on the type of hose you have, right? Every type of hose has a different friction loss.
Right.
Every type of nozzle has a different friction loss.
Right.
So, we're kind of using the street math to make it simple and as close as possible. And literally, if you're off by 10 pounds, you're barely going to feel it. 10 pounds in either direction, up or down.
Also, the big one too is listen to the guys on the knob.
Oh yeah, if they say I got too much pressure, there's a problem.
Tone it down a little bit.
Right. So there's so many ways you can look at that and figure it out and try to balance, what you're doing, but you can't remember everything. And that's really what it comes down to, especially in, that first stage as pump operator. It's like hook up, look up. It's real fast stuff going on. Look at the chart, boom, done. And, a lot of rigs have the preset on it now. You just hit preset.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But things we have to consider. So, like with everything, you could have a chart or something anywhere on your rig. These just cover certain guidelines. So one covers oxygen, one covers carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, and CO, and it gives you basic alarm guidelines. So for CO, 0 to 9 parts per million, investigate the CO source. 10 to 50, evacuate occupants, shut down source, ventilate building as needed. Above 50 part per million, don your SCBA while inside the structure and notify proper utilities, fire marshal's office, stuff like that. And, like your numbers can be different. NIOSH recommends 35 parts per million. Um, OSHA recommends 50 parts per million for the worker. And like Bobby talked about, short duration, it's really not going to harm you. And we're not saying don't follow policy, whatever your department policy is, you follow it. If they're saying at 0, you put your face piece on, so be it. It is what it is. The air is free. But is it really necessary at 0 to wear an SCBA? The problem is, and this is where it gets crazy, is those cross sensitivities. What if it's not CO and you're breathing in some other toxic chemical that you don't know about? Because this is only picking up 4 gases.
Right.
That's where the situation comes in. And that's why it's important that once you start getting readings, you really need to start considering wearing that face piece and breathing fresh air.
So let's imagine a scenario here, and we'll go from start to finish. Typical CO run. So you're going to have, and I don't know how it is around the rest of the country, but here we get 2 types of carbon monoxide alarms. The standard carbon monoxide alarm, my CO detector is going off in the house. The other one is a CO emergency, where somebody's reporting symptoms of some sort. So you pull up to a house, right? You want to calibrate your meter before you're getting into the house, make sure it's got the fresh air. You go into the house, you start getting some CO readings. Where are you going from there?
Well, first off, about calibrating. So you're really not calibrating your meter.
Or not no.
The only time you're calibrating your meter is when it's put in the machine, and that's calibrating. Right. So what you're doing is you're turning your meter on in a fresh environment. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Now, some meters ask you for fresh air setup.
Yeah.
That's what it'll say, and it say yes or no. Okay. And people have different thoughts to this. I went to a class with an MSA rep, and I went to a lot of meter classes. And like I said, you got to continually learn. But being a hazmat instructor, they would send us to a lot of programs. So first off, one of the things he said is never do fresh air setup, which I thought was very interesting. And I was like, why would you not want to do that? And they were talking about removing that whole sensor, that part out of the meter itself. But he says when you hit no, it automatically reverts to the last good setting.
Right.
So if you're calibrating your meters on the regular, basis, and everybody's different. Some people do it once a month. Some people do it every 6 months. But however you're calibrating, but if you're clearing those and bump testing them all the time, if you continually hit no, it reverts back to that setting every single time, the last time you calibrated it. Because if you hit yes and you're in a bad environment,
it's now going to pick
it's now bump testing it to a different category.
Right.
So that is an issue. So if we always hit no, now it's going to be back to that last calibration. The problem is you might have hit yes at some point, and I don't know that. That's the only problem.
Right.
So it's important that we put our meters into a machine and calibrate them as often as possible. That's first off. And I'll get into the scenario that gave me in a second, but I just want to touch on certain things about the meter. Okay, so calibration is important, and making sure we go through proper checks, keeping them in a clean environment, take care and maintaining the meter so that it works properly when we need it. All right. The second part of that is when we turn it on, we want to make sure that it's operating correctly. There are times where you're going to turn a meter on and it might be off a little. It might say 2 parts per million CO from the start. Okay. That means that your meter was bump tested or got an improper reading at some point, or it needs to be calibrated. Now, I'm not saying you don't just throw it away and say, I'm not going to use it now. You could still use it. Just remember where you started from at that too.
Right.
And like Bobby said, you always back it up with a second meter.
Yep.
Anytime we take readings. So you have a second meter in there. So it's very important that we do that. Okay. But we want to start off in a good environment and then move our way in, and then obviously follow our department procedures. So you get a CO alarm, are there occupants, are there not occupants that are showing symptoms? That's one cue, right? Years ago, before we had meters and technology, they used to bring canaries down in the mine. And if the canaries survived, they figured they survived, and that's kind of how we look at things sometimes. So if we're showing signs and symptoms, then automatically it should be heightened awareness, something might be going on. That's first off. Could they just be sick? Yes. Okay. So the alarm's going off. We talked about this. CO alarms beep 4 times. Beep, beep, beep,
It's
beep.
quicker beep.
Not
Beep, beep,
always.
beep, beep.
It depends on the
That's how
meter.
it's supposed to be.
Yeah, it depends on the meter, but
Oh,
it's
you're
going to
talking
be
about this meter.
no
Oh,
alarms, but it's going to beep at least 4 times. A fire alarm will beep 3 times. So that's first off. Do you hear the meter going off? Then when we get to the door, we want to take readings at different levels. So CO is slightly lighter than air, so it's a 0.968 compared to air, which is considered 1. So it's slightly lighter, which means it should rise, but it's so close to the same as air. That's how it gets a little crazy. So all gases are tested in a lab at 68 degrees. It's called standard temperature and pressure. So it's atmospheric pressure, 14.7, and at 68 degrees. So if CO is present at 68 degrees, it should be almost combined with the air, but slightly rising.
right.
Now, if it's hotter, it's going to do what? It's going to rise faster. If it's colder, it's going to sink. Okay. So the idea of us going into a fire, hitting it with a hose line, we're cooling it down. What's it going to do? Sink, go to the lowest level. Okay, as fast as possible. It's probably going to be everywhere, but for the most part, it's going to want to sink once we cool it down.
Right.
So colder environment, stuff like that, it's going to start to sink. So just understanding the basics of regular CO and how that's going to operate. Get to the door, we're going to take readings at 3 different levels. So we're going to do high, because it's CO, so it should be rising, medium, and then low. Right. This meter right now does not have a pump on it. This is what we call diffusion mode, which means that the sensors are present right in front of it. So the air is touching it basically all the time and getting instantaneous readings. If you have a pump or a hose, then it's going to take time for that sample to get through that hose to get to the meter.
Yeah, so you got to kind of, when you're walking through, if you have that connection to it, if you're starting high, you have to sit there for a bit, let it do its thing. Then you go medium, same deal, wait a little bit, then low, wait a little bit.
Correct. So depending on the size of the pump that's in the meter itself, that's going to tell you how long it's going to draw. So some of these things are 2 to 3 seconds per foot of hose. And even if you have a squiggly hose on there, that could be a 10-foot piece of
Right.
hose. So if it's 10 feet, 2 to 3 seconds, how many seconds is it?
20 seconds.
Okay, see, we're doing math again. Math. Chicks dig math, they say. I don't know. But anyway, 20 to 30 seconds in each spot. So in diffusion mode, it should react a lot faster, which is good. So high, medium, and low, we want to check. And then we want to look at our meters and interpret that reading. If we see anything, we know it's like something's present. Doesn't have to be CO. It could be any type of gas other than that target gas. And that's what we call it. The sensor is CO. That's the target gas we're looking for, but it will pick up other things. And I brought this cross sensitivity chart. This is the MSA one, but you can look these up online. You can put it on your meters if you want, but it just shows you that they put other gases to the same sensor. So this is like the CO sensor. They put hydrogen sulfide against it, and it shows it got a 0 cross sensitivity. But it also shows like hydrogen and other things got other readings. So those are things we have to look at, is if another gas will come up on that CO
So
sensor.
that was something that we talked about. We talked about definitely last episode and a couple episodes ago with the hydrogen.
Yes.
Because big thing now, batteries overcharging.
Yep.
Will start to release hydrogen. You might pick that up as carbon monoxide. So
correct.
You'll have the people with the electric vehicles charging in the garage. So if you're getting high CO readings in the garage, but there's a car in there that's non-combustible engine, well, double check the battery, make sure the battery's not overheating, because that's the first thing we think, right, when we go into CO.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a car that was running in the garage, maybe some residual carbon monoxide from that? Was it cooking? Was it a acetylene torch? But I feel like this might be something, the hydrogen specifically might be becoming more prevalent in households.
And it could be more than just hydrogen. You don't know.
Right.
I mean, there's so many different factors. I mean, literally, we had a run in Kentucky Fried Chicken, and the cross sensitivity that was showing up on the CO sensor was the floor cleaner, which is crazy. So everything is giving off some sort of gas somewhere along the line, and we just don't know what we're picking up. And could it still be CO? Yes,
Mhm.
but we're going through the process of elimination to determining what the correct source is. Um, but the other thing that's very crazy, and long before I really knew a lot about meters, was sometimes I would get a negative reading on the meter. Have you ever seen a negative reading?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I saw a negative reading one day and I was like, oh, that's odd. Maybe the meter's screwed up, And then when you look at the cross sensitivity chart, like here's hydrogen cyanide against the CO sensor, and it gave a -5.
Interesting.
So, -5%, excuse me. So it came up on the CO sensor as a -2. So, like sometimes we get these negative readings and you can have what they call sensor drift. Like the meter goes to a 1 or a 2 and then comes back down to 0 or goes to a negative and back up. They call that sensor drift sometimes. You may get a little bit of gas that's touching it, but sometimes the meter just drifts a little. But some of these here's isopropanol against the CO sensor came up at -8 on the meter itself. So I thought, the meter was broken, just need to be recalibrated. And then later on, I start learning about all these cross sensitivities. And I go, maybe that's why I got a negative reading. So did I have something in there that I didn't really know about?
Right. So in that case, say, we always talk about the secondary reading. You go in there, your meters show a -8. Somebody else brings in a second meter, their meter's showing -8. What's your plan of attack there?
Well, that's where you got to start processing elimination like anything else. If I can't figure out why, right, now back out, throw it in the Googler, all right, or look up a cross sensitivity chart and now see if I'm getting readings and negative. So now I'll go to my chart and I say, where are all my negatives on this list? So I see isopropanol, I see hydrogen cyanide, I see sulfur dioxide are all negatives. So now, could I have one of those gases within that structure?
So for the common firefighter, right, maybe somebody that's not too in tune with the different types of gases and chemicals out there, you get those readings. Somebody savvy enough to pull up a cross sensitivity chart, they say, oh, okay, it's whatever one of those you just looked at. What's their next move? If they don't know where that type of chemical or gas is coming from, what should you do?
Hazmat team,
Hazmat.
right? Now we're upgrading. So it's like anything else, just like a fire. Sometimes we have to call for the appropriate resources. Like we see it's a tech rescue. I got to call for a tech rescue team. Now we're coming up. All right, call for the fire marshal, call for the hazmat team. Let's get somebody in here with more meters or more knowledge that can now investigate this.
Right.
Now you might be able to find these things already there. All right, for instance, like sulfur dioxide, which is SO2, and some people have it in their meters. They'll have it as a fifth gas. Sulfur dioxide is a sewer gas.
Right.
So it's heavier than air, smells like rotten eggs, the whole 9 yards. So you may be able to determine that. Maybe it's back and the sewer's backing up. It could be giving you that, or like a hydrogen sulfide, So hydrogen sulfide did not come up on the sensor, but maybe I see on here, my H2S sensor is getting a reading, or my SO2 is getting a reading. And now I look at that and I say, well, where could that be coming from? So sometimes just flushing the drains or running water down the drains.
The reason I asked that question is because, like we discussed, we don't train on the meters.
We don't train enough.
And
a lot of avenues.
And the other part of it is it's probably one of the things that we don't train on as much as we should, but carbon monoxide alarms are a very common,
super common
call that we go to. So occasionally you'll get that carbon monoxide alarm that comes through where you're not getting everyone coming down to the firehouse to go to it. So you might get that junior crew who goes there and they're getting these sort of strange readings and they're not sure what to do. And that's something that I've talked about, and I put a couple of articles out about people, younger crews specifically, not fully understanding what their resources are outside of them, because most of the time you go to a call, there's a chief there, or somebody that's pretty savvy in an officer's position. But if you're going there and you just happen to be the senior guy on that rig and you're not too sure, what you're dealing with and where to go from there, well, who do you call at that point?
call mutual aid.
Right.
Or, like I think we should be mutual aiding chiefs here on Long Island. If you don't have a chief officer, why not just mutual aid a chief from a
Right.
neighboring district? Maybe not, I don't need a whole engine, but I need a chief.
Right.
Or request a chief and an engine. I need mutual aid, one chief, one engine.
Right.
And at least somebody with a little more experience and knowledge can come. They might not even have the answer, but maybe they'll know where to get the resources.
Yeah, and that's what I'm
that's
saying.
the difference.
I think that sometimes when you're in that situation where you have a junior crew that's going to an alarm, you just kind of you're used to just going to the alarm with a chief or an officer. They kind of handle all that other stuff. So it's very good to understand your resources if you're somebody who just happens to be in the officer's seat at that time and it's turns out not to be your run-of-the-mill alarm.
Mm-hmm. And to be honest, we're not trying to scare people, but just like I said in the last episode, sometimes you're gonna go home and like you're not gonna sleep because you're worried that we're trying to help people, not try to kill people. We don't want to go home and then find out later on that they died because of CO poisoning or some sort of toxic chemical that was in their home. So if you're going to start making decisions in the fire service, and listen, you can't use the Volly stuff. It's an excuse. You can't excuse yourself from doing the proper job. We are
Right.
here to provide a service, whether you pay to volunteer, I really don't care. You better provide the proper service. And if you don't have the answers, you better be calling for the right person, because we don't want to harm people. And God forbid it does happen, and that's going to come back to haunt you forever.
I always tell people anytime that I've gone to a carbon monoxide alarm and we clear everything out, I'll go to the homeowner and just say to them, "Hey, if it goes off again, call us again.
Absolutely,
we're gonna come
But,
out." People always
even with
apologize.
smoke is the same thing, right? We looked at everything, can't find anything, the odor dissipated. Call us back if you smell anything.
Yep.
Stuff like that. You're going to be home, please call us back. The other option too, like I said, we're very strong with our fire marshals on Long Island.
Yep.
If you're a younger officer, you don't know, call for fire marshal.
Right.
For town of Brookhaven or town of Islip, Smithtown, or wherever you are in this country, call for a fire marshal.
Right.
They'll have at least more knowledge, they'll have some skills, and they'll know who to call.
Exactly.
So don't be afraid to ask for a fire marshal. We should be investigating a lot of different things, but the fire marshal's in there.
Right. So back to the CO alarm.
And we're going down rabbit holes. Like,
Yeah.
I could spend an 8-hour day talking about meters. So, this isn't a full meter class or anything like that. And, I would suggest you take a formal class. And, I'm just going to show this. This is an article that I wrote. I can't believe it when I just looked at the date of this. This is from 2015. I wrote this. This is on fireengineering.com. It's called the multi-gas meter. I wrote 3 articles back then about the meter and meter use, and it goes through the different gases. It talks about how to use your meter properly. It's just very basic, but I can't believe this is 10 years old already. May 22nd, 2015.
Wow.
So please go out there and learn about this stuff and keep yourself safe, your family safe, and other people in your community. But getting back to the alarm, yes. So we start at the door. We start taking some readings, okay? One thing that I tell people about the meter, a lot of us wait for it to start alarming to tell us there's a problem. And you shouldn't. You should not wait. You should look at your meter, and as you start seeing some changes, that's like a heads up. Something's here.
Especially when it's really starting to jump.
Yeah, but even if it's small amounts, right?
Oh yeah, for
if
sure.
If it's 1 or 2 parts per million, I don't get crazy. I really don't. But once it starts going up, boom, something's going on. So
Right.
If you're with a partner, we're going in together. Hey, Tyler, I just want to let you know I'm getting 2 or 3 parts per million now. Just a heads up. And whatever your policy is with masking up, that's your department policy. But just a heads up. So don't wait for it. Don't clip this on your coat and just wait for it to beep. Once it does start beeping, that's what we call an action level. You have to do something at that point. So whether it's a LEL situation, which is going to go off at 10%, or a CO alarm, CO meter, your CO meter is either going to be set at 25 parts per million in the factory or 35 parts per million in the factory. That's how it's going to be set. So understanding where your meter is going to alarm, and that's on these sheets that I have on here. It tells me, like my oxygen sensor, low alarm's 19.5, my high alarm's at 23%. That's set for this meter. So you can look at this, like say I start getting a reading, and now I look at it, I say, oh, I'm at 19.8. When's this thing going to start alarming? It's dropping. It's normally 21, right? Or 20.6, 20.7. I can look at this quick and say 19.5 if I can't remember, right? Or the hydrogen sulfide, right? Here's my carbon monoxide, low alarm 25 parts per million, high alarm 100 parts per million. Flammability 12% to basically 75%. It's 74 and a half, but just gives you some general knowledge. So something's going on. Now, I hit that action level. Bam. Now what do I do? So in the case of CO, what do? First off, make a communication. Let everybody know my meter's alarming at 25 parts per million or 35 parts per million, whatever. Let everybody know on the scene. We have something here, okay? Then you have to do stuff from there. So what can we do? We can ventilate. We can have a hose line stretched if we need it, if it was LEL, we can do stuff, right? We could shut off appliances or maybe it's gonna keep climbing. Am I still safe if I go above 25, 35, 45, whatever? Okay. Now with LEL, it's a different story. We're talking flammability. I hit 10% LEL inside. We better be doing something.
Right.
You better be ventilating. You better be making some changes, shutting the gas off to the building, something like that. But, and like I say, every situation is different, but we have to take action. You can't just keep walking around being like, oh, look, it's 45%. No.
Right.
So it's an action level. So first is interpreting the initial readings as it's starting to change. And then from there, going all the way up. Okay. So what we have to do, taking actions to make it better. So we're going to investigate for carbon monoxide sources. That's going to be first. Carbon monoxide alarm. What are our sources? Things that burn. So what burns? Oil burners.
Yep.
Gas burner.
Car.
Gas stove. Fireplace. Right?
Yep.
Start going down the line. Car running in the garage. Stuff like that. So we look at all of those types of sources first. And then if we shut them all down or we can't find that, now what?
Now we go to our next step. Okay, what could this be?
What could this be? So most people are going to shut everything down. They're going to open the windows. They're going to ventilate, get it down to 0, and then close everything back up and see if it starts coming back.
Right.
So those are the avenues you have to start pursuing. Now, if it comes up and everything's shut down, now we got to start going through that process of elimination. What else can it be? Could it be one of these cross sensitivities? Right. And I'm not sponsoring MSA or anything like that here. I'm using MSA meters. I don't care if you use Scott, Draeger, I don't really care. A meter is a meter. General operations are generally the same. Some of the features are different. This just happens to be the meter I have here, but they all have some sort of cross sensitivity. If it is an electrochemical sensor, let's not get into the deep basics of metering, but if it has some sort of electrochemical sensor, you're probably going to have a cross sensitivity, whether it's hydrogen sulfide, whether it's a sulfur dioxide, whether it's a CO sensor, cross sensitivity.
Right. So I think another important part of this, you mentioned LEL, and we don't get them necessarily all the time, but you do get that call that comes through. And again, it might be different in other places, but for us, it'll come through structure fire, gas leak inside the building. So LEL, I feel, is an interesting one to try and make people understand. And usually what I've done for drills is just the simple, take a aerosol can and a lighter and show people what exactly the LEL is. If I'm spraying that aerosol can, I put the lighter right to the knob, it's just going to piss it out. It's too rich.
Too rich to burn.
Too rich to burn. If I hold it out here and light it, nothing's going to happen. There's not
too
enough.
Lean to burn.
Too lean. But you hold it right in the middle, you're going to get that flamethrower that
Correct.
you made when you were a teenager, messing around with your friends. So that's a very basic way to show somebody what LEL is. But on the sensor and knowing what percentages are there is where it gets a little tricky for people, I feel.
Mhm. So first off, don't try this at home. Don't use
Yeah.
aerosol cans
Yeah, don't try
and
it at
stuff
home.
like that. That I'll tell you that first. Whether he does that or not, that's his own business. But I don't want to see anybody get hurt or blowing things up
Right. It could absolutely
unnecessarily. It
blow
could
up
definitely be issues. Um, but yes, LEL is one of those touchy subjects. And there's a lot of people that say, "Well, I'm not at 10% LEL," or I'm at 10%, but it's really not dangerous because it's not going to start to ignite. Okay. And with LEL, it can get very, very deep. First off, like gas companies, when they go out and do their metering, they do what they call the full environment they're taking a reading from. Okay. They're not just looking at the LEL. When they say they have the LEL, they're looking at the total atmosphere. Okay. Our meters are just looking for the gas that burns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I wish I could write a chart on here, but I can't. But every gas has a flammable range, and there's usually a wide range of gas. So, like when you look at natural gas, and it's not going to be on this chart, I'm sure. I don't have it here. Every gas is a very wide range. So, when you look at where it can flash or where the LEL goes off and stuff like that, your meter is going to be calibrated to a specific gas to burn. So, a lot of us in the fire service or the regular meters are usually going to be calibrated to methane gas, which is our natural gas. Okay. In the hazmat world, for the technician level, a lot of their meters are calibrated to a gas called pentane. And the reason why they use pentane, it's a middle of the road gas. Okay. So if it's off from that gas, regardless, it's going to pick up every gas and try to sense it or burn it, depending on the type of meter. Um, it's going to show up as a number or percentage value. And you would have to look at relative response to get the actual concentration. But this is actually the chart here, and I don't know if people will be able to see this, but I'll just hold it up. It's a little chart here. And you could see where different gases come up on the screen. But pentane is right down the middle. That right up the middle of that chart there is pentane gas. So this is the one right here. So that's why most hazmat teams use pentane gas, because they're not just looking for natural gas or methane. They're looking for anything that burns, whether it's benzene, whether it's natural gas, whether it's pentane, which it's methane. It doesn't matter, or xylene. So that's why they use this center line. So methane, if you look, it's off. So when you're looking at different gases, if you have one meter set to pentane and one's to methane, they're going to show different numbers.
Yep.
Okay. So they look at the entire environment. We're just looking at the gas. So if they tell you they're at a gas leak just like we are, and they're saying I'm getting 5% LEL, you're going to be like, oh wow, that's nothing. 5% LEL. Well, 5% LEL of natural gas on their meter is 100% on our meter. Okay. We read 0 to 100% of the lower explosive limit of whatever it thinks it is, methane. That's it. So when he's hitting 5%, or she, or whoever's there, that's ready to burn.
Right.
It's at the explosive range. So it goes from 5 to 15% natural gas or methane. Okay. And the worst case explosion is at 10% of the entire atmosphere. And New York City Fire Department, we changed a lot of our procedures after Deputy Chief Mike Fahey passed away. There was a gas leak in a building. They went in and started investigating. They ventilated where they could, but they couldn't get to one floor. And it eventually found an ignition source and blew up. And Chief was standing in the street. And, listen, gear probably wouldn't have helped him either way. But I really, truly believe everybody should be wearing gear on the fire ground, regardless of what happens. But the building exploded. A piece of the roof came flying up and hit him and killed him in the street. So that's why it's important to wear gear, wear your helmet all the time when you're on the fire ground, because you don't know. And yeah, it's a gas leak. It's no big deal. You never know. You have to be very careful. So the FDNY looked at all the procedures, and they changed some items after he passed away, due to, basically looking at chemical physical properties and everything else, and how we take care of or handle gas leaks. And part of that came to new metering. And some of the meters we have now, um, we use some Draeger meters, for the hazmat group, with technician units in hazmat one. Um, and we have regular meters, excuse me, that do basic LEL, just like this meter. And then we have other meters that do basic LEL, and when it gets to 100%, it switches over to the entire environment.
Interesting.
And it's not for everybody. This is really technical stuff.
So let's
Hold on, before you go there, let me just finish. This is technical stuff, and the reason why they did that is we wanted to be able to talk the same language as the gas company when they're reading the entire environment. So once we get to its explosive environment at 100%, we said we want to know where it is in that line between that 5 and 15%. So the hazmat team can see if it's at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or how explosive, or if it's over into the too rich environment. Because what happens once our meter hits 100%, you don't know if it's in its explosive range or above its explosive range. So this way we could see exactly where it is. If it was way too rich to burn, we could handle things maybe a little differently. So the meter switches over. So it'd say 100%, and then it's all of a sudden it'd switch over and say 5%, 6%, 7%, 8%. But you got to know what you're looking at and how to interpret that meter.
Right.
But it was just to get everybody on the same page. So it's just a different world. Once our meter goes over 100%, we don't know where we are. So do we want to be in that environment? Absolutely not.
Right.
We do not want to be in that environment, but it's very important.
So for the common firefighter, what we were just talking about before with the carbon monoxide, what do you do if you get a certain reading? If you're a guy during the day, go to a inside gas leak, you walk in, you see your LEL start changing up. What is your plan of attack?
It really depends on the building. What's the occupancy, what's going on, is it natural gas, is it gasoline, is it benzene, like depending on types of facilities and buildings, we'd have to go off of that and try to figure it out. So, you could have a natural gas leak, you could have a propane leak, you could have a gasoline leak. And I went to a response once, we had a smell of gas, and it was a twofer. I got off the rig and I smelled gasoline. And the person was on the front step and they're like, I have gas smell in the house. I said, well, does it smell like it is out here? And he's like, no, it's a little different. I go, well, show me where you smell gas. So we had one person walk around the building while we went upstairs in the building. And in the building, they had a natural gas leak at the stove. But they also had a 5-gallon gas can that was knocked down on the side. It was running in the rain.
Interesting.
So, it's at different levels. So you have to be cognizant of the occupancy, type of environment, type of building, and then start going off of that to eliminate, or process of elimination, to figure out exactly what it is and then how bad that concentration is. So as it's coming up, and I tell people all the time, even if I'm at 5, 6, 7%, this is a good spot. If I go out that door over there, it could be 100%.
Right.
Or it could be 100% above the ceiling tile above my head. I just don't know it. This is all that's seeping through. So, natural gas kind of rises a little bit, right? Propane settles down. So depending on gas and what it's going to do, and I mentioned this with flammable liquids, usually the vapors stay low, the majority of flammable liquids. And we talked about that with Bobby. So when you look at metering, what type of gas is it? Where is it? And then am I in a safe environment? So like I said, I'm at 5% right here. If it blows up that back room over there, could I still get hurt or killed? Absolutely.
Right.
If it's 100% above the ceiling tile and explodes, could I still get hurt?
Right.
Absolutely. So don't let your guard down. Once we start seeing readings, something's up. Now, most people, when they're going to go to a gas leak, they're going to have a sniffer, whether it's a TIF, a back rack, or whatever brand you have, but it's a dial that you turn and you adjust it as you go to pinpoint the source.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot use that meter by itself. you have to go in with an LEL meter as well to use it in 2 parts, because that picks up at as low as 2 parts per million. All right. This doesn't pick up till 1%. 1% equals 10,000 parts per million. So that meter might smell it, or you might smell it. It may start picking up something. This still says 0.
Right.
But once I get up to a higher level, it's still, that meter's still doing the same thing. And now I could still be getting LEL.
Correct.
Because it's going so high. So it's very important that you use meters in conjunction with each other when you're at a gas leak. But never let your guard down. If you start getting an LEL, I don't care what the amount, you could be somewhere in a building that can kill you.
Right. And now in that sense, because you don't know at that moment, like if it's a commercial building and you have a good amount of people there, now you got to start thinking about evacuating the building.
Yep.
And then even the
Absolutely.
same goes for an outside leak, because if you have enough gas that's pushing out in a certain area, you have all this now oxygen around. You don't know exactly where that explosive level is going to be.
No.
So now you have to think about evacuating neighborhoods and stuff like that.
Depending on the size of the leak, depending on
That's
when,
what I'm saying.
There's so many different factors, and that's why you have to continually educate yourself.
Correct.
And, understanding the basics of meters for the general firefighter and first responder, and then once it gets significant,
What are your
where we go from
resources?
here. I might have to check surrounding properties, other houses around the area, especially if a contractor knocks a gas main out. So those are all different things that you have to progress off the basics.
Right.
And a lot of us, and it's not knocking anybody, it's paid, it's volunteer in certain areas, that we don't understand enough about the initial first responder using a meter. Okay. And then it gets into a lot of different things. So for instance, oxygen. So I told you before, just like my little cheat sheet says, 19.5 is the low alarm. But oxygen is very interesting because the meter is only looking at oxygen. It doesn't look, once again, at an entire environment.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at oxygen, 20.6, 20.7, 20.8, somewhere in that range, depending on where you are, that's our normal oxygen level. But what's the rest of that atmosphere that's filling it?
Right.
So for the most part, it's nitrogen. Nitrogen, 78% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. And then you have all the other gases in there, including CO and other crap. When we look at the oxygen sensor, that's our basis off of what else could be out there. If that meter starts changing off that 20.678, whatever your meter starts at, when you turn this on, you should look at that number right away. What is that number? It's 20.7. Great. That's where I'm starting at. If I start seeing that drop or rise, something's going on. If it's rising, that means that something's giving off oxygen.
Yep.
So we have a greater oxygen content, which changes all the numbers that we're normally looking at. Same thing if it goes down. Okay. We need about 16% to breathe. Okay. But if it starts dropping below,
now you're in an oxygen deficient environment.
Okay. But what is going on that oxygen is gone?
Right.
So either the oxygen's being eaten up by something, by rust, oxidation, stuff like that, or it's being displaced by another chemical.
Right.
So like I said, this meter is only going to pick up a few chemicals. So what chemical is pushing that oxygen away? So if you see a change in your oxygen sensor and it goes, let's say it goes from 20.8 to 19.8, my meter's not alarming, but it was a 1% drop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's 50,000 parts per million of something that pushed that oxygen away. And why is it 50,000? Before I told you a 1%, right, equals 10,000 parts per million. The problem is we're only looking at oxygen. So it's not just one part, it's 5 parts of the atmosphere that are missing. So a 1% drop in oxygen, you have to times the 10,000 times 5, 50,000 parts per million. So you have a 50,000 part per million chemical that pushed that oxygen away. So what is it? Okay. And the big thing right now that's out there, and by the way, your meter's still not alarming, so you have to pay attention to that drop. 50,000 plus million. We have, and you can look this up. Phoenix Fire Department did a great reenactment video on this oxygen displacement um, that they had in a McDonald's restaurant, and you can look it up. I play the video all the time when I'm talking about meters. But basically, if you go to any bar or restaurant, they're going to have CO2, right? And most of the time, we got CO2 bottles so that we can have fountain drinks or beer, except for Guinness. Guinness is nitrogen. That's the good stuff. But anyway, that you're going to use CO2, but they were going through tons and tons and tons of tanks. So what they did is, and McDonald's has them. You could go to any fast food restaurant out there. You can go to most bars and restaurants now. They don't have regular CO2 cartridges anymore, or cylinders. They have what they call a doer. It's a 4L doer. It's basically like a cryogenic container almost, but basically they put liquid CO2 into it, and it basically expands into a gas, and it's pumped through sometimes plastic lines within the building. So the particular incident they had there was an employee went into the basement of the McDonald's. She got overcome by carbon dioxide.
Yep.
Came up the stairs and collapsed, couldn't speak. She was pregnant. They got it as an EMS run. They thought it was everyday general thing that went on. Talked to her. She doesn't answer any questions. 2 firefighters go downstairs. They're like, something's odd. They start coming back up, and you can watch the video. And one of the guys sort of collapses himself, and he goes, I don't know what's going on. There's something down there. And they evacuate the building. Turned out it was liquid CO2. It was leaking. And there are alarms in the buildings for these things. But somebody put tape over the sensor because obviously it was leaking. So luckily they figured it out eventually. There's a lot into metering. They talk about how this all went down, but it's very important. I've had 3 of those runs. One was in a Boston market, one was in a McDonald's, out there where the same kind of thing happened. So we have to be cognizant of any changes for our oxygen sensor, because carbon dioxide is heavier than air, odorless, colorless, tasteless, just like CO, but it's CO2, carbon dioxide. And if you breathe too much of it in, you're going down.
Right.
So really need to pay attention to meters, look up chemical and physical properties, how they're going to react, look at temperature and stuff like that, and the density of products. And then you can get better readings and understanding, interpreting readings that are out there.
Yeah, and I think for the people that are watching this episode, don't look at this, like Kevin said, as like a meter class or hazmat class.
I can go deep. I can go a lot deeper. Read my article. You'll get some good information, probably open your eyes a little bit. But the multi-gas meter, fireengineering.com, or I can send it to you.
Yeah, and just take the lessons today again, and we'll probably be doing more of these types of things, practical examples of what the common firefighter should do in certain situations. This particular episode we did today just happened to be piggybacking off of the episode with Bobby Salveson from the hazmat guys. So, weather's starting to get a little bit warmer. Maybe we'll start doing some stuff outside a little bit.
Yeah, we could do some. A couple minute drills and stuff like that.
Yeah,
showing different things. One other thing I wanted to touch on, because we talked. I have a bunch of things I wanted to touch on, but we talked about this in the last podcast with Bobby, and I mentioned about the different types of batteries and charging cords and stuff like that. So, like I said, I had a little incident in Atlantic City with a charging plug for an iPhone, and these are 2 plugs. I know it's probably a little difficult to see. They both look like regular plugs. They both look very similar, Apple product. The one in my right hand here that I'm shaking is an Apple actual charger. This one is not in my left hand. And it says on the side, it says Trav Light. Okay. And I don't even know where I got this from. I don't go around stealing people's stuff, but it was in my bag and I plugged it in. And this thing actually kind of went on fire a little bit, and it still smells like electrical fire, and you can shake it. It's slightly bigger than the Apple one. It's very, very similar. But this thing started sparking right in the lamp in my hotel room. So like I was saying before, if you buy aftermarket market products, and a lot of us do, I try not to. I only buy Apple stuff for that importance, because if this gives off the wrong amount of power, it could overcharge your battery and can start a fire, whether it's your computer, whether it's a regular charger. Even with a lot of these battery chargers that are out there, these are different ones that are out there. But make sure you're getting products that are UL tested, and use the proper cords and everything else, because like you said, we could be off gassing from this stuff.
Yep.
And getting meters on our meter readings, because of overcharging of batteries, or these things are going to light on fire. And here's an even more modern one. This one's a magnetic type charger, but you buy these things on Amazon and everything else that are out there, and we don't know what we're buying. So, word to the wise, if you start getting readings on stuff here and there, and you're trying to find a source, and you're going through all your pieces, and you're not coming up with anything, start looking for little things like this, little batteries. And like I said, they're all different sizes and shapes. And if they can see these, but they're all different sizes and shapes. And because of the amount of cells or the amount of batteries that are in these things, can cause more problems. Could give a bigger spark, a bigger fire, or overcharge and start lighting things on fire. Kids charging their computers on their beds. The fan doesn't get enough cooling power, and it overheats, and it could light the bed on fire and stuff like that. So when we can't find sources with our meter, start looking for items like this, computers and things that could be giving off toxic gases and could be coming up on our meters and sensors. So just figured I'd touch on that. But be very careful of the products that you buy out there. Make sure they're safe for the environment that we live in, and try not to have any issues.
Awesome. Well,
I think that's a wrap. I
that's
mean,
right.
we're probably
We're
been
gonna-
going an hour, I think. I
Yeah.
don't even know. But I was hoping to touch on some more stuff that he talked
I
about,
know,
but
just keep.
we kept going on the meters. But this is just very basic, touching the surface of meters. And like I said, I mean, I could go on for hours, and proper use and storage and looking for things, and the different types of sensors. But get yourself some knowledge in meters and monitoring, and make sure you're not putting people in harm's way back in their homes.
Right.
Make sure they're safe. So,
All right, that wraps up.
I think that's a
Episode
wrap.
17.
Episode 17. I can't believe it's 17 episodes.
I know.